It's the 17th of the 3rd, 2-4, and silly season in F1 has officially kicked off in kind, as James Vowles, TP of Williams, has said that whilst progress has been good with Logan Sargeant, he's expecting to see him kick on, make progress in kind. And this coming not long after James Vowles had waited to the 11th hour last season to make a decision on whether to extend or terminate Logan's contract. Oh, for Logan Sargeant, it was squeaky bum time. Whilst last season was Logan's first, had things gone differently there at the end, it could very well have been his last. Lest we forget, there are very many hot prospects waiting in the wings. Mention no names: Lawson, Pourchaire and Drogovic. Because whilst Logan had shown signs of promise last year, when all was said and done, he was no less than 26 points shy of his teammate Alex Albon. Not to mention there were more than a few unforced errors from Sargeant, costly ones, crashes, and the qualification story as far as the head-to-head between the two Williams drivers reads even worse for Logan. Albon didn't drop not a one. Against this backdrop then, you might say that Logan's quite lucky to have a seat in 2-4, but that being said, Vowles wants to see progress, emphasising it's important for Logan now to get good results. The only thing I would say, continues Vowles, it's not the early on bit anymore. No pressure, mate. And the Williams TP bookends this by saying Logan's not coming back as a rookie this year. He's got experience now, a year's worth behind him. And those comments read like a goalpost shift in terms of his performance management objectives. And allow me to translate for a second James Vowles speak into layman performance management terms. It's go time, Logan. It's now or never, chap. And in other silly season news, it's reported that Fernando Alonso is doing Fernando Alonso things. 200 IQ strategic moves from the man from Oviedo, Asturias. Again? Because all this fella's been talking about over the past couple of weeks is how strong his negotiating position is. That he's the only champion currently on the grid that doesn't have a contract for 2025. Come and get me, Mercedes. Shop window settings. But there is an additional wrinkle in all this, because the latest statements from Alonso have indicated retirement might be on the cards. So if he harbours ambitions of joining Mercedes, of filling Lewis Hamilton's not insubstantial shoes, why would he do that? But let me put you on game. Bernie's acutely aware that Toto's dream is to have Kimi Antonelli in that seat as soon as 2026. He doesn't want them to be scared off by the false narrative that Alonso's hell-bent on a multi-year contract. As discreetly as possible, Alonso's saying, if it's Mercedes, I'll accept a 1 year. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. And RB's team principal, Lauren Meckers, has spoken to a point that Eddie Jordan made a couple of weeks back, that his charge, Yuki Tsunoda, has found himself in a privileged position. The insinuation being he's in Formula One because he's a Honda man. Whilst Yuki Tsunoda's obvious talents are commensurate with that of any F1 driver, the Honda sponsorship deal most definitely didn't hinder him. Meki says the team has always given Tsunoda confidence, pampered him, allowed him time to integrate. Indeed, Tsunoda's matured, he's grown year on year, and I believe Yuki and Daniel can be a good pair together. Then we'll have to evaluate whether they perform at their best or not. There is a common thread here. Because of Liam Lawson, Lauren Meckes was very impressed, ranking very highly his performance at Zandvoort last year. In the rain. That's the beauty of it. You put these drivers in the most awkward of positions, the most difficult of moments where they need to perform, and they do it. He did it. On Liam Lawson, the RB team principal finishes, we will see if the opportunity comes. You know, I think we can safely say that Lauren Meckes rates Liam Lawson very highly. Squeaky bum time, therefore, for Messrs Ricciardo and Tsunoda-san, both of whom in 2-4 will be driving to survive. And in other news, McLaren's Lando Norris has spoken very candidly about the potential material downside health risks born of riding in these cars. And this, of course, is a symptom of ground effect cars deriving the greater portion of the whole of their downforce from their underfloor. To optimise for this, they need running low and stiff. And that means that over a 60-70 lap race distance, the ride can get uncomfortable. And the quadrant team leader speaks to this, citing worries about his health. his body and his safety. Although, continues Norris, it's not as bad as it was 2 years ago, it still takes its toll. I struggle a lot with my body and my back and all these things. I have to do a lot now that I didn't have to do a few years ago. This is techie. Ahead of the next rule and reg change in 26 from Lando to the rule makers, this feels like a plea. But I can't help but be reminded of Lewis Hamilton's plight at Baku in 22. So bad was this fella's back, he could barely exit the car. And since motorsport has and will always be inherently dangerous, this begs the question, how much responsibility should drivers take over their own safety? And when is it the responsibility of the FIA to step in and save the drivers from themselves? For the drivers, how much is too much? When do you do like the legend Nicky Lauda and just park it up? All questions I'm sure the FIA have already considered and addressed. Alex Albon too, on the latest edition of the Beyond the Grid podcast, has spoken to the difficulty of driving this latest iteration of F1 car. Albon asserts that to offset the not insubstantial physical tolls of being an F1 driver in 2-4, he invests extensively in self-care, nutrition, training, a sleep doctor even. And across 24 races in less than 50 weeks, there's a risk of burnout too. Albon took sick last year and Carlos Sainz's appendicitis this year are a case in point. In other less serious news, Valterri Bottas was spotted today at Adelaide in a Leighton house. Some say that might be the closest the Finn ever gets to driving an Adrian Newey car. And 97 champion Jacques Villeneuve, never being one to shy away from the limelight, has chimed in on the impact that one George Russell has had on Sir Lewis Hamilton, saying that King George's youth and aggression have been a wake-up call for the now 39-year-old Lewis Hamilton. Villeneuve says it's hard for a driver when you've spent years easy winning, particularly the years against Valtteri Bottas. These years were very different, continues Villeneuve, to 2016 when he had Nico to challenge. Because in the Bottas years, he didn't even need to be at his best to win a championship. Lewis, continues Jacques, had gotten comfortable with Bottas. He had a wake-up call in 22 when partnered alongside George. George had that young energy, just wanted to destroy the world. And between the two, King George Russell did a lot better that year. Now for Lewis Hamilton, going to Ferrari might be that shock that he needs, the injection of that youth attitude. And whilst that's damning from Jacques, I don't hate it. Which one of us hasn't been in a relationship or a work circumstance from which we needed a break to breathe some fresh air? Maybe in 2-4 for Lewis, everything's just got a little bit stale at Mercedes. Mentally, this is sabbatical settings that the dude's on garden leave pending 25. And one-time Scuderia Ferrari driver Giancarlo Fisichella concurs, saying that Lewis will feel right at home from the off at Ferrari. The Italy's team will give him a warm welcome when he arrives next year. Just imagine those scenes. Fizzy goes on to say, however, that Lewis will need to be super focused, dialed in, integrate himself within the team, concentrating, putting in hours at the factory. Fizzy says Lewis will have to do this because Charles is already integrated, embedded in that Scuderia Ferrari team. Not to mention that Leclerc fella, quite quick from A to B, some say. And senior performance boffin at Ferrari, Jacques Clear, has provided some additional calls for optimism for Lewis Hamilton, speaking glowingly about Ferrari's line of travel as far as its design philosophy, that their car in 2-4 is less scary than it has been in previous years. In addition to materially improved drivability, the team's also gone some way to mitigating for the loss of race pace between quali and race trim. Jacques continues, it goes quicker everywhere under all conditions. But the SF24 has more power, more downforce, it's lighter, because that's fundamental development. In all of the aforementioned, the car is slightly improved. I like the cut of this fella's jib. And to the prohibitive favourites for this year's World Drivers and World Constructors Championship, Red Bull Simulator driver Jack Dennis has spoken to the strengths of the RB20, saying that the chassis is benign, very neutral, that Verstappen and Checo can push it with a lot of confidence without fear of reprisal. It's not a car, says Dennis, that's very nervous in high speed, nor is it very understeery in low speed. It's just very neutral in terms of its handling dynamic, which enables the drivers to push irrespective of the track circumstance. And of course, no F1 roundup would be complete without the compulsory, no mandatory update on the fiasco that now envelops Red Bull's team principal Christian Horner. drama. Because after an 8-week-long private investigation, leaked WhatsApp messages, a team principal exonerated, an employee suspension, and a Red Bull power struggle, yesterday it was leaked that contrary to all that the FIA had said on the matter, they'd already been notified on 3 occasions of a complaint, twice by whistleblowers and once by the complainant. And on initial review, the timelines and communication just weren't matching up. To millions of onlookers, regardless of the underlying truth, it smacks of the FIA just papering over the cracks, more keen on managing what it looks like than understanding what it is. Because hitherto the FIA had been reluctant to step in and intervene in what they said was an internal investigation. A hesitance and a diligence that Susie and Toto Wolff, Lewis Hamilton too, haven't been privy to. You'd be forgiven for not being aware that the FIA has an anti-harassment and anti-discrimination policy in place. And the FIA, it seems, continue to paper over the cracks, issuing a statement thus: at the FIA, inquiries and complaints are received and noted by the compliance officer and the ethics committee where appropriate. Both bodies operate autonomously, guaranteeing strict anonymity throughout these processes. As a consequence, and in general, we're unable to confirm receipt of any specific complaint, and it's unlikely that we'll be able to provide further comment on complaints that we may have already received from third parties. Being transparent, open and honest, you'd imagine, would be ground zero for any regulatory body worth its mettle. But for the FIA, transparency, honesty, openness, behave yourself. I mean, if past this prologue, leopards and spots,